Dear all, I'm not sure if the stream has started. Yes, I think that yes, because it's shown in my monitor. So, dear friends, today is January the 5th, 2023, and the first thing I would like to say is Happy New Year. Welcome to this new 2023. I hope you had a very good time with your family and friends. I hope that you spent these days with a little bit of peace of mind and not looking very much on the news and in the situation that are happening in the world. But I think it's time again to start to work, to start to review what's going on, and I will. This video will be very short. I will simply tell you thank you very much for all of you who is following me in Twitter, who is asking questions in direct messages. Feel free to ask questions here as well, and feel free to comment on Twitter as well. This short chat, together with the felicitation with the new 2023, I would like to speak about why it's important to support Ukraine. Because I think it's very important, especially in those festive days that we are living right now. No, New Year, Christmas. A lot of people right now are in the front. They are not able to stay with their loved ones, and they need to be there for us to be safe in our homes. So why it's important to support Ukraine, and it's not only important for Ukraine, by the way. It's important for the rest of the world. First of all, if you live in the West, I think it's very easy to understand why it's important to support Ukraine. Imagine, for instance, if Russia win this war, and you think, okay, so Ukraine will lose part of this territory. What's wrong with that? I will not argue about this because, if Ukraine for you is some faraway country that, in fact, were not known for anything special in the West, why should you bother about what will happen to Ukraine on the war? What will happen to the territory of Ukraine, right? But first of all, you need to think about humanitarian part. A lot of people, Ukrainians, will become hostages within the authoritarian state of Russia. And it's nothing wrong about Russians, but there is a lot of things that are wrong with Russia as a country itself. That means that a lot of people will be forced or to change absolutely the way they live, or they will have to go to prison. And this is very hard because when you live in the West, as I do, it's very you give a lot of things for granted. The liberty, the freedom that we have here, and the respect that we have towards us as the citizens, we give it for granted. And this is not something that we're given for free. For hundreds of years, our grandfathers were fighting, were having revolutions, were dying in order to build the society where we live right now, where the government and the companies and so on, they respect people. So when you look at current Russia, they have no respect to people at all. If you look what they were doing, for example, in New Year's night, both in Moscow and St. Petersburg, people went to celebrate the New Year, as the police simply took them and brought them to they call it CISO, which is like a temporary prison or something like that. It's absolutely it's like a big prison right now, Russia. So people will suddenly become prisoners. People actually that although Ukraine is not perfect, they are in terms of liberty and freedom, it's much more advanced than Russia, and it's even much more advanced than many European countries. For instance, in terms of democracy, right? If you look at the Ukrainian parliament, they don't have like radical far right parties like, for example, Spain or Italy has. So Ukraine it has some problems, especially corruption is the main problem. Economy is very weak, and the economy problems are essentially part of this corruption because everything goes to the wrong hands. But overall, it's a democratic country where actually president changes, parliament changes, and there is no one single authoritarian hand that can do whenever they want. There were attempts to have something like that with the President Yanukovych, and this ended very badly for President Yanukovych. He had to flee Ukraine because he wanted to be like a little bit like Putin, but it's not working there. So this is the first part, humanitarian part. The second part, and is even more important, if Russia wins Ukraine, it will get such a strong political position within Europe and in the world that the problems will become not only in Ukraine but also in European Union. For instance, you know that Russia is subsidizing and is paying some of the far left or far right parties in Europe. And this is well known. They don't care if they are far right or far left. It's important that the party is populistic and the party is somehow going against the system, right? And the system is what we have in Europe and United States that is different to Russia. When they have one person that is trying to manually do things and correct things. So what they want to do is destroy the system that we have. And if Ukraine fails, this influence will be very strong because if you win, if you have a victory, you suddenly receive a very strong political influence. Europe and United States, they showed their support to Ukraine initially. They are showing their support right now, and it's normal because Ukraine is part of the Western world. And if Ukraine loses, it's somehow the Western world that lost. So it's important to ensure that there is no victory for Russia. There is no territories that go back to Russia. Finland lived the same situation back in 1930s, where Soviet Union invaded Finland, and they had to seize part of the territory for the peace. The thing is that when you do this, you never know when you will have the same situation back again. You never know when the big country will want to take part of your land when they have some stronger military. So the main advice here is fight until the end. Fight until you can, because you cannot make peace with enemy like Russia. You need to defeat. Afghanistan were able to defeat Soviet Union. Why Ukraine will not be able to do this? I don't know. So, if we want in Europe and United States, if we want to live with decent political parties, if we don't want to have a destructive political influence from Russia, we need to ensure that Russia loses this war. From economic standpoint, it's very important that Russia loses, right? The world's economy is sustained by United States dollar and by European currencies. Those currencies help economy grow, and they redistribute the wealth. If you see how Asian countries, the growth that they were experiencing, that growth were only possible because there were policy in central banks, both in Europe and United States, but especially in the United States, that allowed this growth. There were steady increase in money supply. There were steady inflation, and this inflation, what we're doing was bringing the wealth from the west to the east. So this currency control that somehow has the Central Bank of the United States, the Federal Reserve, and some European countries, what it makes is that there is a wealth transfer from the rich countries to the poor countries, from the countries that are developed to the countries that are developing. If there were no such a strict, if there were no such such an open monetary policy, if there were no money printing, wouldn't be that transfer of wealth. Because if you now see, you can compare easily the salaries in Shanghai and Hong Kong for comparable jobs, right? For some office jobs or for some IT jobs, you can compare that to some of the European countries. And maybe 20 or 30 years ago, especially 30 years ago, if you were going to Shanghai, to Beijing, to all these countries, the people were extremely poor there. You couldn't even find a comparable jobs to compare between Europe or United States and in Asia, right? And this suddenly changed, right? And this were possible only because there is a monetary system like that. If Russia gains the political influence and military influence in the world, the economy that is built upon United States dollar and euro will cease to exist. It will essentially disappear. And if you think there is something good about this, think twice, because there will be chaos, and the chaos will bring suffering to the West, but much more suffering to the rest of the world, the second world and the third world. And the development that we're experiencing these countries, thanks to the wealth transfer from the West to the East, capital transfer from the West to the East, all this will stop, will cease, and we will be again in the Middle Ages, where there were no development. Everyone were like looking for their small kingdom. There were no cooperation between countries, and at the end, the development of the humanity and the economy, world economy, will stop. We will not fly to Mars, let's say, if we stop this situation. And finally, for Asian countries, I think it's worth mentioning that it's very important to maintain the global stability. The global stability allowed us to live for quite a long time with, I would say, 10s of years of peace in the world. Asia lived very bloody wars in the past. Middle East, unfortunately, we were not able to pacify Middle East. It's somehow always fighting. But if you look at Asia had quite a lot of years of economic growth, of economic competition, instead of bloody fighting. If there will be some disequilibrium in terms of military power worldwide, there are high chances that Asia will start burning again. And think about conflicts between Japan, Russia, China, you can add there both Koreas. Think about Cambodia, think about Thailand, and think how many people live there. Taiwan, for sure. Think about how many people live there. Think how important their economies are to the global trade, to the world. And imagine, for instance, that there will be a war, like Asian war, with several nations fighting against other nations, just because, for instance, someone tried to dispute some islands in the ocean, or there is some border problem. And here, a special hint to India. There is some strange situation with Pakistan and Afghanistan. So we are living right now in very, very dangerous world, and it's enough very small action that can bring a big war to us. And the lack of the one single authority in the world, the authority that United States were for quite a long time, the lack of this one single authority will jeopardize these risks. So what I want to say is that the best outcome for everyone would be the defeat. And I will not say defeat of Russia. Defeat of Putin will be a victory for Russia. Defeat of Putin will mean that freedom will be given to many, many, many people in Russia, in neighborhood countries. Hopefully, defeat of Putin will mean that nations and people and societies and communities of Russia will be able to have their own fate, their own country. They will be able to be independent from what is called Russian Federation right now, which is nothing more or nothing less than an empire where nations are in prison. I hope that they will be able to have their own way. And I hope that if Russia will disassemble, if the Putinism will end, and Russian people will liberate themselves from their somehow historical understanding that they need to be somehow responsible for all that people that they conquered for some time. I hope that when those countries will appear on what it is right now, Russian Federation, I hope that the people will be liberated, the natural resources will be liberated, and Russia will again become part of international community. Their products will start flow into international markets. Russian people will understand who they are, because for some reason you have historical territory for Chechens, for Buryats, for Tuvins, for all of them in Russia, but you don't have historical republic or historical area or historical administrative part for Russians, because somehow Russia is for everyone, but there is no part where Russians feel that this is our historical land. In fact, they think Ukraine is their historical land. This is the worst thing. This is why they actually started the war. But Ukrainians, if you speak about what is Rus, or Rus, Kievan Rus, they don't want this imperial way of living. They don't want to be responsible for peoples and nations from the Baltic Sea back to the Japan Sea, right? They just want to live their own fate and have their own countries. They don't want to be, but somehow Russians, they still want to somehow be responsible for all that peoples and be in charge of them, which is absolutely sick thing in 21st century. Being said that, supporting Ukraine is not that something that you just give to that people. It's an investment that you are doing in your future. If Ukraine will fail, your life will be miserable. Your life will be really miserable. You might be killed in the next 10 to 15 years if Ukraine will lose. If you think that you live and you are safe and secure in your Western or Eastern country, and something that happens in Ukraine does not affect you, really think twice. Because if Ukraine fails, you most likely will be killed. Or you most likely will have a miserable life in 10 to 15 years. So again, I would like to thank to all people who supports Ukraine. I would like to say again that the people that are right now in trenches in the Ukrainian war, they are protecting all of us. I want to say thank them as well. I want to wish all of you and them especially Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And finally, I hope that this 2023 will bring us peace. And I think this will happen. I explained it in the video that I recorded before. See you next time, and feel free to write me on the comments, ask questions, and criticize me, which is also very good, because this is something that helps me to prepare my fireside chats and to understand what's the things that are interested to you. See you